Hello friends, my name's Emile and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we're taking a look at some modern supercars. Let's jump this off with the first car of today, which is the Bugatti Zonda Cinque. 678 horsepower, 2,858 pounds of weight. This is the second most powerful vehicle here today. It's also the second lightest, which does give it a very good power to weight ratio. And as we know through various laps around here, power to weight ratio does count for an awful lot. Just look at the top of our leaderboard. It's got the Ariel Atom V8 up there, which has an insane power to weight ratio. The Bugatti Zonda Cinque, one of my more favourite of the supercars, I guess. I do really like the Zonda. It's a very cool car. Was around for almost a decade. This thing was around forever. And the Cinque was one of the final send-off models, as much as this car had several of those. The Cinque is one of the more well-known. Anyways, how does it actually drive? Well, it's very good indeed. I will say, this car, I remember it being a lot better in the dry than it is in the wet. I'm going to put that down to maybe something like the tyres perhaps just aren't quite as suited for the wet weather here. But it's still a very good car to drive nonetheless. I would recommend driving it in the dry though. I'd probably save it for the dry. But still, go drive the Zonda if you haven't already, because it is a very good handling car. It will surprise you. You know, with this much power and this little weight, you'd expect it to constantly bite back at you, but it really doesn't, which is very surprising indeed. Next up, we move on to the Noble M600, 650 horsepower, 2,756 pounds of weight. This is the lightest vehicle here today, and like the Zonda, it has a pretty darn insane power to weight ratio. The Noble's one of the more underrated supercars in this game. I think it is one that gets passed over a little bit, when it really shouldn't be, because the Noble is a pretty crazy car. I do really like the Noble M600 as much as it is a little bit bland to look at. Anyways, what is the Noble actually like? Well, it is a tricky car to drive. Again, unlike with the Zonda, it isn't quite as forgiving. You know, this will chuck you into a wall if it doesn't like what you're doing with it, or it will just randomly throw the rear end out. But if you can get everything right in this car, it is great. It is an absolutely great handling car. You know, it has loads of grip. Again, not particularly forgiving, but it does have loads of grip. In that sense, it's kind of like the Ariel Atom V8, although you don't have to be quite that alert to drive it. You know, it will give you a little bit of leeway, unlike an Ariel Atom that will just throw you into a wall as soon as you do something wrong. But yeah, Noble, one of the more underrated supercars. I would recommend giving this one a try if you haven't already. It is phenomenally quick around the track. Anyways, next up we have the Lamborghini Aventador, 700 horsepower, 3,472 pounds of weight. This is the most powerful vehicle here today. However, as the sort of counterpoint to that, it is also the heaviest, although that is down to the Aventador's crown jewel. You see, it has four-wheel drive, and around a wet track like this, four-wheel drive does make all of the difference. It's much better to have a four-wheel drive vehicle in the wet than it is a rear-wheel drive. So, what is the Aventador actually like to drive? It is excellent. It is absolutely fantastic. Every time I drive an Aventador, I just get amazed by how much grip these things have. They're just insanely good. You know, it suits my driving style down to an absolute T. It's super forgiving. You know, you can't really muck it up in the Aventador. If you start pushing it a bit too hard, it will simply understeer very slightly just to let you know you're overstepping the limits. But actually finding those limits in the first place is quite hard, because the Aventador will take a hell of a lot of punishment. Yeah, very good car to drive. I absolutely love the Aventador. I love the Murcielago as well. I can't really choose between the Murcielago and the Aventador. I love both of them equally. If we're saying Murcielago SV versus the Aventador, though, Aventador every single day. It's a much better handling vehicle. Next up, we have the Lamborghini Huracan, 602 horsepower, 3,135 pounds of weight. This is the least powerful vehicle here today. So while its big brother, the Aventador, was the most powerful, this is the least powerful. And that certainly is saying something with 602 horsepower. Yeah, there's a 98 horsepower difference between the least powerful and most powerful car. So they're all pretty well rounded here today. That being said, the Aventador is the Huracan is one of the lightest cars here today. In fact, it is the lightest of the four-wheel drive vehicles. Again, four-wheel drive should be pretty good. How does it drive? It's decent. It is more snappy than the Aventador, and that's not necessarily a good thing, I find. It is trickier to drive. I don't particularly like the way the Huracan drove today. Don't get me wrong, it was a great car. It was a good car to drive. You know, it had loads of grip and everything, but I wasn't quite as confident in the Huracan as I was in the Aventador. The Aventador, you know, similar to the Viper GTS that went round months ago, you know, it is a much more poised car, the Huracan, but the Aventador's sort of just more easygoing, and that for me just feels a lot better. So yeah, the Huracan though still very, very good at a supercar nonetheless. Next up we have the McLaren 650S, 641 horsepower, 3,148 pounds of weight. Of course, the 650S is one of the Huracan's main rivals, and well, statistically the 650S should have it beat. It has more power, it doesn't weigh all that much more. However, it doesn't have four-wheel drive, it has rear-wheel drive, and as a result, the 650S, I hate to say this, it is probably my least favourite of the cars here today when it came to the driving. Don't get me wrong, I love the 650S, it's a great car. But when it comes to the actual driving experience, it just isn't great. It's alright. It will try and slide out on you. That's really what it wants to do. It honestly feels kind of floaty. Not like floaty as in suspension floaty, but floaty as in it almost feels like a hovercraft when you're driving it. It does have, don't get me wrong, it has grip, but it does feel a bit hovercrafty, a bit floaty. It's really weird because the 650S, usually whenever I drive it, it's usually quite well, but for whatever reason, when it gets to top gear, it just starts feeling very weird. But yeah, it's still a good car, but when it comes to actually driving, I'd probably go with the Huracan. Next up, Ferrari 488 GTB, 660 horsepower, 3,252 pounds of weight. Again, another 650S Huracan rival, and again, this one just builds on the 650S. It's got more power, it does weigh considerably more than the 650S, a whole 100 pounds more. But how did that actually affect the Ferrari? Well, it is a decent supercar to drive. It is better than the 650S in my opinion. Between this and the Huracan, I would probably rather drive this just because I knew what this was doing a little bit more than I did with the Huracan. Although that's admittedly because the 488 GTB doesn't really understeer, it has one specific trait, it just wants to slide. Now, it's very strange, when I was sort of taking this car out of the out of the Hammerhead, it just wanted to slide, which was really weird. What the 488 GTB genuinely feels like it wants to go drifting, which I was not expecting from this car. You know, it feels like it just wants you to hoon it, and I can imagine it's quite fun doing that. Not really conclusive to a good lap time, but still decent supercar to drive, certainly. Probably one of the better modern choices, to be honest. If you want like a super modern supercar, that's one that you might want to go for. Another modern supercar is the Audi R8 V10 Plus. This is the 2017 model, 2016 model, 610 horsepower, 3,428 pounds of weight. Now, on paper, this shouldn't fare particularly well. You see, it doesn't have all that much power. It has 8 more horsepower than the Huracan, which is the least powerful vehicle of today. However, it is the second heaviest vehicle, so the second least powerful and the second heaviest. That shouldn't bode particularly well for the R8. However, it is very good to drive. It is, in my opinion, a little bit better than the Huracan when it comes to driving experience. I'm not a huge fan of the Audi R8, but I do have to admit it is the better driving of the two. However, it does feel heavy. The Aventador doesn't really feel particularly heavy, it just feels more sort of soft. This does feel heavy. You can feel the weight, which is a bit strange. You know, it doesn't weigh all that much, but you still can feel the weight in the R8, so hey, that kind of rhymed. I would guess I'd recommend the R8. It's not a bad driving car, but it is a bit of a dull car. And our final car for today is the Ford GT. This is the 2017 model, 630 horsepower, 2,890 pounds of weight. So, the Ford GT, the newest car here today. This is the new kid on the block when it comes to supercars. Yeah, how does it drive? The Ford GT is superb. I was not expecting this car to drive as it does. I don't know if it's just because it's the cover car and it gets an unfair advantage, but my god, the Ford GT is really, really very, very good to drive indeed. This thing, sort of, for me personally, it's edging ACR Viper levels. It is just phenomenal to drive. I don't know how it does it. It just confuses me. This car blows me away. It's sort of stealth fast like the R390, but you can tell, you know, it is quick. It is something else. Again, statistically, it's nothing special. I mean, the Zonda should have this thing killed, but this has, you know, almost the same straight line speed as the Zonda, but it just has absolute phenomenal amounts of grip. This thing is absolutely superb. If you haven't driven the Ford GT, which I don't know why you wouldn't have, go drive it, because this is a superb car to drive. And because it's so superb, it hits second on our leaderboard with a 1:16.776. That is a stupidly quick time. That's only a second off the Atom, and you got to bear in mind the Atom's like a high up R class car. The GT is just off the top of S class. It's just stupidly quick. The Zonda Cinque though does pretty well as well. It finds itself in third with 1:17.535, beats out the previous second place, the R390, by a little bit. Noble M600 finds itself in 6th with 1:18.384. Does lose out to the 458 Speciale, but it does beat out CLK GTR and the F1 GT. Lamborghini Aventador finds itself in 9th with 1:18.552. Considering that car's sort of statistics, that's very good. It beats the MC12, beats the ACR Viper by 0.5 of a second, loses out slightly to the F1 GT, which is a bit of a shame. That is sort of a crowded place, the 1:18.5s. Moving down the board, we find the other car goes into 13th with 1:19.127, does beat out the Ferrari Enzo. The Ferrari 488 GTB finds itself in 15th with a 1:19.309, beats out Celine S7, which is pretty darn good. Does lose out slightly to the Enzo though, which is kind of surprising. The Audi R8 V10 Plus is in 17th with a 1:19.620. Not a bad time from that car considering, and unfortunately today our loser is the McLaren 650S, which goes into 18th with a 1:19.752, which still isn't a bad time. I mean, it beats out the EB110, beats out Lamborghini Murcielago, beats out the BAC Mono. But the 650S just didn't quite have the handling I was expecting it to, which is a bit of a shame. Considering. So there you go, that is the modern supercars round. Very, very good times all around. That Ford GT is just in a class of one though. It is insanely good. Anyways friends, and that is it for this episode of Forza Top Gear Laps. As always, if you have any themes or suggestions for cars you'd like to see go around the track, leave them down below in the comments section. Next time we're going to be taking a look at some oddballs, so join me for that. Anyways friends, I want to thank you all very much for watching. Mine's been the Real Emile, and until next time, farewell.